Crafting is a core part of your success in Last Epoch. You need to know what items to pick up off the ground, often done via your loot filter, and how to enhance them so that you can make the best thing possible. This will even allow you to make gear that is, well, legendary. And no, I'm not using that hyperbolically. You can make actual legendary items if you understand the crafting system correctly. And so today, I'm going to go over crafting in Last Epoch's campaign, the first way that you'll interact with the system, then move on to explain how all of the glyphs and runes work so that you get a better idea of the system as a whole, give a little bit of a demonstration on how to craft in Last Epoch, wrap things up with a short talk about legendary items, and give some of my thoughts on the crafting system overall. Don't be intimidated, it really isn't that hard to get into. I would call it a system that's easy to start and difficult to master. So for now, buckle in, be sure to get subscribed if you like this content and want to know more about Last Epoch's endgame systems, leave a like while you're down there, and for now, let's get into things. So let's start with a little bit of terminology. What is crafting? How do you do it? And what does it take? You can craft on any normal, magic, rare, or exalted item with forging potential. This does not work on unique, legendary, or set item. The process of crafting reduces forging potential. Therefore, you have a limited number of attempts on any given item, and you'll need to drop a new one. You can craft almost any affix in the game. However, you can only craft tier 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5. Tier 6 and 7 are drop only, and that's what makes exalted items special. For crafting, you'll need affix shards. These tend to drop on the ground. You can get them by killing enemies, or shattering items and using a rune of removal. Some rare affix shards are quite hard to get, whereas others you'll have literally hundreds or thousands if you play enough. Each item can have 2 prefixes and 2 suffixes, so you may commonly hear players refer to an item as tier 20. This means 20 total tiers of modifiers, with all of them being at least tier 5, essentially a perfect item. A big part of Last Epoch's endgame loop is about finding things on the ground that you think have potential, then using your affix shards, glyphs, and runes to craft them up, and overall putting that item on to increase your build's power and continue your progression. But despite the power of crafting in the endgame, the first time you'll start crafting is probably going to be during the campaign. See, these resources are available at a fairly early level. Furthermore, you're not really punished for using them early on. So let's go over how you're going to craft in the campaign and give a couple quick examples. So let's just say you found a new upgrade, and it's better than what you're currently wearing, because what you're currently wearing isn't very good. However, it has even more potential, forging potential. That's right, you hit F to open the crafting menu, and you're going to start slamming affixes on. Now, as you slam those affixes on, forging potential on the item will be consumed. Its level requirement will also go up as you keep adding things. This limits your ability to craft. You'll be able to do it a little, but you're not exactly making a perfect item here. No T20s at level 7. So, during the campaign, I would prioritize crafting damage on your weapons, life and resistances on gear, and movement speed on boots, things which you can use to directly help yourself progress faster. Do this instead of trying to get fancy and gambling on things with glyphs of chaos or other stuff that, while in theory would be good, is in practice just a waste of resources. Save all that for the end game. The shards you use will not be returned to you, so try not to use too many rare shards, such as plus skill level either. Save those for your good items in the endgame. And so now let's go over all the glyphs and runes, along with short crafting demonstrations of each. Remember, these are demonstrations to show the functionality of the effect, not how to properly craft an item. I'll get into that in the next step after this. Now that we've spent some time talking about crafting in Last Epoch, I want to do a little bit of a demonstration while going over all the things you can do with the crafting system. That means getting into glyphs and runes. In general, you can think of glyphs as modifying the crafting process and runes as adding their own unique effects. Now, just for an example of a very basic craft. Let's say I wanted to use these gloves. They have some lightning res, some necrotic res, and increased throwing attack speed. But I don't want to just use the tier 1 increased throwing attack speed, I want to make it better. This item has 37 forging potential. If I upgrade it, it costs 1 to 10. But I can use a Glyph of Hope. This modifies the outcome of a craft, and it gives a 25% chance to consume no forging potential. So let's just try that here, see how it goes. 7 forging potential was used. In this case, the 25% chance didn't trigger. Now if we're going throwing attack, I don't know. Something else that goes with throwing attack speed might be increased area of skills or throwing damage. So let's see again if the Glyph of Hope procs. Nope, and this time minus 11 forging potential, which is very unfortunate, and now we only have 19 left. Alright, maybe conserving forging potential just isn't meant to be on this item, and sometimes that's the case. But I don't need lightning resistance. Well, in that case, I would use a Glyph of Chaos. A Glyph of Chaos, when you upgrade an affix, allows it to randomly change. And in this case, randomly changing the tier 3 lightning resistance could give you a very good outcome, or it could completely brick your item. This is a gamble and not something you should do provided you have a lot of forging potential left. It's a use of last resort where I'm going to put it on, but I'm not going to be super happy. There we go. I've used another 12 and I've now turned it into life regeneration. If that's what you need, well, all of a sudden the item got a lot better. But maybe this entire thing failed. Now, another way to use this system could be on an item that already has pretty decent bases. You got some minion damage, some chance to shred. I don't know. Maybe you don't need minion damage. See, Glyph of Chaos, throwing damage. All right? I'm going to pretend that's exactly what you need. So now it's all about upgrading. When upgrading, you usually want to use the Glyph of Hope, because again, that allows you to conserve forging potential. There we go. Glyph of Hope, preserve forging potential. We've got tier 4, tier 4, tier 3. Here's the thing though. There's a pretty generous roll on that chance to shred armor. It could be 41%, all the way up to 55. And at 50, we're doing pretty good for ourselves. So maybe when upgrading it, you might want to use Glyph of Order. Now in most cases, Glyph of Order isn't worth using, because it doesn't save you forging potential. But let's just pretend that these were tier 5 magically. I know, they're not. Just pretend for the sake of this demonstration. Here we have a Glyph of Order, and we're going to upgrade, and it's going to keep the same range within its roll. As you can see, it upgrades exactly to 65%. And there you go. And now you could upgrade it to 89%. So, it preserved the percentile, being quite good. The last glyph that I'm going to talk about here is Glyph of Despair. And for that, I need another example. So I'm going to grab those gloves out and put this quiver in. Glyph of Despair seals an affix instead of upgrading it, or more accurately, it has a chance to. And this is where it gets interesting, because let's say I wanted to use this quiver, but I didn't need more stun chance, and I didn't really want to roll it away because stun chance on the item's pretty good. I could try to seal it with a Glyph of Despair. You are much more likely to seal a low tier affix than a high tier affix. Upgrading from 4 to 5 in sealing is almost guaranteed to fail, but upgrading from 2 to 3, pretty likely to succeed. There you go. Affix sealed, stun chance at tier 2. And so now, I can go in and craft this item however I want, and have 4 other affixes, like let's just say physical damage, maybe bow attack speed, or I can go into one of the suffixes from down here, chance to blind on hit, put those on. The stun chance acts as a special 5th affix due to the Glyph of Despair. Now that I've gone over most, but not quite all of the glyphs, I'll get to insight shortly, I wanted to talk a little bit about runes. The first rune that you'll probably use is Rune of Shattering. This destroys an item, creating a random number of affix shards, and it's quite useful in the campaign. So here we have cold damage, fizz res, elemental damage over time. And I got 1 cold damage, 1 fizz res shard. The shards you get back are random and generally less than you get from the item itself. The next rune is Rune of Refinement. It rerolls all of the values within their tiers. So as you can see here, 3 to 5, 21 to 34, 5 to 6. And fun fact, you can combine a Glyph of Hope with a Rune of Refinement. Like so. The 4 went down to a 3. Now it rolled 31% increased damage over time, and the health on kill remained at 5 since it's a 50-50 whether it changes or remains the same. Next up we have Rune of Removal, which again can be combined with something like a Glyph of Hope. What it does is removes 1 affix from the item and gives you shards equal to its tier. So maybe I'm making a Dreadshade build, and I need +2 level of Dreadshade shards. And also, let's just pretend that his body is completely useless. It's a terrible item, and I don't need it anymore. So I'll remove a random affix. In this case, I got the mana. But I still have forging potential. So I can try again. Remove the health shards. A little unlucky. Still have forging potential though. At this point, I don't need the Glyphs of Hope because I can't possibly use all of the item's forging potential. And there we go. 6 level of Dreadshade shards sent to my forge. You can use Rune of Removal when the shards on an item are more valuable, whereas you use a Rune of Shattering when you just want to get something, or it's a relatively common drop, so you don't mind the fact that a lot of the shards are going to get destroyed. Just like your item. Next up we have Rune of Discovery. This adds random tier 1 affixes to all empty slots. I'll be honest, even though it has an increased chance of rolling rare affixes, I haven't really found a use for this one. Like, cool, you get crit chance and bow attack speed, but now all your forging potential is gone. Technically, the use is you then use a Rune of Shattering, and hopefully get some of those rare shards back, but most of the time it's easier to just find the rare thing on the ground, then waste time picking up a base, rolling some extras, and shattering it anyway. That said, maybe occasionally you'll find a use for this, and after all, you're going to pick up quite a few, so you might as well use them eventually. And if Shaping, on the other hand, rerolls implicits. Usually this is the last step on an item. So, right now we have 36 armor, range 36 to 36. This is not a good candidate for this. You would not want to use it on anything that only has a single range. Whereas here, let's just assume it was finished, you might actually want to use it, because getting that 15% increased throwing attack speed could be quite valuable. Of course, you can use Glyph of Hope to try to preserve the forging potential, and just try it. There we go, -1. The 6% increased got rerolled to 14 and 12%. Rerolling an item's implicits often isn't the most important thing to do in the crafting process, but it definitely helps and is a step in finishing your item. Rune of Ascendance, on the other hand, is really interesting, because it changes an item into a unique or set item based on the item class. So here I have a bow. It will not give me a unique or set Imperial bow. It will give me a unique or set bow. And I don't really need to worry about the Glyph of Hope, because forging potential is not going to matter. It's a unique. And I ascended it, Gathering Fury. It's now a unique storm bow. Also, let's try a dagger. You can use this to target farm uniques, as it's just another source of them. I got a Gelcor's Blast Knife. Do remember that item classes can be a little bit tricky, so always double check whether or not you can turn the item into what you want. It respects the base class, not the final version. Then we have Rune of Creation. This duplicates the item, but reduces the forging potential on both to 0. So, if I wanted 2 of this amulet, let's just say to turn into a legendary, or because I think it's really, really awesome and I want to sell it, as I think you'll be able to sell copies to the Merchants Guild, I could duplicate it here. This will reduce forging potential, no one can craft on it ever again, but I now have 2 of my extremely rare and valuable base item. If something had T7, T6 affixes, that might be a candidate. Runes of Creation are incredibly rare. I would generally not assume you're going to find very many and use them extremely cautiously, which is why I'm not going to use this here. That would kind of be a waste, and I already did that for another video, though I can't do it twice. Exiled Mages are a relatively recent addition to Last Epoch, and with them come experimented bases, special hybrid modifiers that are far more powerful than the normal affixes you'll find. This also brought 2 new ways to craft your items to specifically either add these new experimental affixes or seal them, very similar to a Glyph of Despair. So let's get into a little bit about the Glyphs and Runes, which allow you to interact with these, since if you're going to make a build around one of the experimental affixes, you'll want to know how to upgrade or replace your gear. Now last, but certainly not least, there's 2 special types of crafting materials, Rune of Research and Glyph of Insight. Glyph of Insight is used to change a prefix into an experimental affix on your gloves, boot, or belt. And it doesn't work on items like this, which already have an experimental affix. On the other hand, Rune of Research works quite a bit more like Glyph of Despair, sealing an experimental affix on the item. So for example, let's say I have these boots and I do this. I've created a Glyph of Insight, that is how you get them. And I now have this empty slot where I can put in whatever I want. Let's be honest, it's probably going to be movement speed. And if I was going to use this item, oh look, critical success. Yes, when you get a critical success on your crafting in Last Epoch, you get an extra tier on a random affix. Sometimes it's something that you want and saves you a lot of time. Other times it's a problem because it happens on something that you wanted to Glyph of Chaos away. And once it's T5, you can't modify it further. On the other hand, this is how you use a Glyph of Insight. It puts a random affix on your item. So I'm just going to select any prefix shard like this. And I need to put something there. There we go. So now that I have my filler affix mana that's going to be replaced, I can upgrade it with a Glyph of Insight. Typically, you'd definitely be doing this later on in the process, since like everything else it uses forging potential, and you already want to be working off of a pretty good base item. I'd probably cast spam the poison res, and also probably upgrade the T2 crit strike chance. But here we go, press upgrade, and now I have dodge rating and endurance threshold if you haven't been hit recently. A pretty decent affix, which yes, if you're feeling spicy, you can then seal away with a Rune of Research. Just be sure to use your Glyph of Hope. There you go. So that's just a fun little thing you can do involving experimental base types and experimental affixes. Now that I've gone over the basics of how glyphs, runes, and experimental affixes work, I want to give a couple of more practical examples about how I would construct an item. Now, here's a quick crafting demonstration from making an actual item. I know the theory earlier was a little bit disconnected from that, but I wanted to show how each piece worked individually. Here I have a Ballista's Ring with tier 6 throwing damage and reduced mana cost, and I have a little bit of a Hammerdin going. So, I want something like spell damage, void damage, or throwing attack speed here. I would also like some health and a resistance I'm missing. If I take this ring off, which resistance am I missing? Specifically Phys Res. So that's what I'm going to try to get. Now keep in mind, you only have 39 forging potential and can't always get what you want, but I'm starting from a pretty darn solid base, so I'm feeling reasonably comfortable. For now, we're going to be going with Glyph of Chaos, because I want to change this into a different resistance. And sometimes you hit exactly what you want, and get a free tier upgrade in one hit. Alright, that was maybe a little lucky. Also, forging potential preserved. So, let's try again and see if we can turn the cold damage into anything useful. Obviously, if I didn't hit what I wanted and it bricked, I'd have two choices. I could either shatter the rune, or the item with a rune, get all the shards back and try again on the next one. Or I could use it as is, which in my case, it's probably going to be worth it because my old ring was absolute floor trash. Like, this is so bad. Damage over time doesn't affect me. I didn't need those resistances, and I don't know why I had that on for this long. But hey, we're going to try to upgrade here. I got necrotic damage. I don't do necrotic damage, so we're going to try that again. Intelligence. Again, not really ideal, but hey, it's something. Next up, I'm going to swap to Glyph of Hope and upgrade this health. I wanted the health anyway, so I'm just going to straight upgrade it. There you go. Now the item is tier 21. None of the affixes could be upgraded further. It wouldn't have been worth gambling with a Glyph of Despair to seal something here. If I'd had a low tier mana regen, that absolutely would have been worth sealing as it's relatively high value. But in this case, the odds of sealing a tier 4 affix like the health were incredibly low, and I'd just be throwing away Glyphs of Despair, and I'll be honest with you, you don't get 21 by throwing them away like that. So now all I can really do with the item is reroll the explicits or the implicits. Those ranges that I mentioned before. Now the throwing damage and attack speed, the damage doesn't really matter, so that's fine. The Phys Res, I'm nearly maxed, and the health is pretty on the low end. But I'd risk losing some Phys Res. Can I afford to do that? Actually, yes, even a minimum roll's fine. So let's finish this item and polish it up by re-rolling the explicits and then maybe the implicits. To re-roll the explicits, I need a Rune of Refinement. Oh, never mind. I got way ahead of myself, and I totally forgot that this went to 0 forging potential. Yeah, you do still need forging potential for the polishing phase. So actually, my bad. The item's done, and I put it on. My resistances are now capped. I'm a very, very happy Hammerdin, and I've made myself a significant upgrade. Crafting really is that simple a lot of the time in Last Epoch. But maybe you want to look at another example here. So these are the boots that I used earlier in the video. I've got some cold res, some poison res, some move speed, and some strength. But my tiers are much more limited. So in this case, what I'd probably want to do is use Glyph of Hope as much as possible, and also only upgrade things that are strictly necessary. So I'll pretend that right now I really want movement speed. There we go, Forging Potential. Oh, Forging Potential preserved. We've gone up to tier 4. I did this because the assumption is if you get a certain level of movement speed, you'll be able to equip them. If you don't, you won't be able to. Next, I'm going to go with this. In general, you want to work on lower tier affixes first, then move to higher ones, because you'll notice here, upgrading from 2 to 3, 1 to 12. Upgrading from 3 to 4, 1 to 18. Upgrading from 4 to 5, 1 to 24. It won't always eat more forging potential, but it's quite likely to. So there we go. We hit a critical upgrade, so we got all the way up completely for free. We'll upgrade the armor. Now this is where things get tricky, because every click I make could be my last. There's the greedy route, and then there's the non-greedy route. The greedy route would be just keep upgrading the armor. The non-greedy route would be say, all right, I really want T5 movement speed, so I'm going to upgrade this and equip the item regardless of the result. But you know what? It's always fun when you go greedy. And sometimes you're not lucky. There you go, the item ended up bricking, and that's why if you really needed the movement speed, that is what you should upgrade first. Hopefully you found these 2 quick examples of crafting in Last Epoch to be insightful. And if there's anything else that you want to know how to craft, ask down below, I might be able to help, or join the Discord, ask in the Last Epoch channel where myself or someone else can probably tell you exactly what you want to know. Link to that is down in the description. Last but certainly not least, legendary items. How do you craft them? Well, crafting legendary items doesn't work the same way as crafting everything else, because a legendary item is made when you take an exalted item with full affix slots and combine it with a unique item that has legendary potential in the temporal sanctum. The level of temporal sanctum you'll need to do depends on the level requirement of the LP unique. What this does is it takes one random modifier from the exalted item and puts it on the unique item in addition to all of its existing stats per LP. Which means if you have a 1 LP item, you get 1 random stat. If you have a 2, you get 2, 3, you get 3, 4, you get 4. 4 LP items are incredibly rare, but let you make the best things ever to exist. This system is honestly really cool, and I feel like there's an additional layer of storytelling here, because when you drop a 4 LP unique, the journey isn't over. You didn't just get the ultimate shiny legendary Thunder Fury, Blessed Blade of it, you're probably banned from general chat now. No. You have to actually then find the other piece, the key to fit into that lock and unlock the true legendary potential of your item. The tier 6, tier 7, or maybe even triple exalted item, since I think those can still technically exist, even if they're so rare you're probably never going to see one. Put it all together, and then cross your fingers for everything that isn't the 4 LP god item. I have had a lot of items with 1 or 2 LP that could have been useful and turned out to be incredible just because I hit the right legendary potential. So the system is pretty versatile, but not perfect. And if you want to engage with it, head over to the Temporal Sanctum by clicking on one of the keys, fight your way through the Sanctum, and defeat Jolra. And so that's how to craft in Last Epoch. Remember, you should craft early and craft often. The system opens up while you're leveling through the campaign. It continues to be relevant throughout the mid-game and even late into the endgame as you're making those bases for your perfect legendary items. Because materials are plentiful and available, with a very few exceptions like Runes of Creation or Glyphs of Despair, you shouldn't really worry too much about spending them. And if something is a rarer item, you'll probably know right off the bat from the fact that you only have a handful of them. If you have 100 of something, let's be honest, you're probably going to find 100 more and replace it fairly quickly. If you only have a couple, then you only have a couple and should use them sparingly. The primary goal of Last Epoch is that you can find items off the ground and turn them into upgrades. And in that regard, it does a remarkable job. But if you're coming from a game like Path of Exile, where crafting is almost its entire own endgame, and you can just be a crafter, well, unfortunately, that isn't really a thing here. Though who knows, as the game continues to evolve, it very well may be, because I remember when Path of Exile was first coming out of beta, and honestly, there wasn't nearly as much crafting as there is today. Half of it was just using Chaos Orbs on items and hoping it got better. So I quite look forward to seeing how Last Epoch's crafting evolves. With that said, I'm curious, when you play an ARPG, do you immediately dive into the crafting system, or are you a little bit more hesitant because you're worried about losing currency? If you immediately dive in, let me know some of the awesome stuff that you've made in other games. And if you're a little bit more hesitant, don't worry. It's really hard to use resources in a way that permanently sets your account back if you're trying crafting in Last Epoch, so just dive in and give it a try. With that said, if you're looking for something else to watch, maybe you need to know more about the game, then check out a comparison I did between Path of Exile and Last Epoch, or some of the top 5 Path of Exile builds you can play in Last Epoch right now. Or you can read more about crafting over at MaxwellGG. And if you're coming to this video having never played Last Epoch before, you can pick the game up through my Nexus and help to support the channel. When you buy it there, a portion of your purchase goes directly to me, and trust me, it really does a lot to help my ability to create more videos like this one. Or alternatively, you can support me directly by becoming a patron or channel member, and if you do, you might even see your name on screen here right now. With that said, thanks to everyone who watched to the end, I hope you learned something, and for those of you who saw my previous Last Epoch crafting video, I did say that I was going to redo it since crafting changed a little bit, and I tried a slightly different format as I hope this is more interactive. So, thanks for watching, I really do hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you again in the next one.